Hello and welcome. Oh, I think I hear just a little bit of feedback there, but now it's gone. Perfect. So welcome. We are excited to hear again from Jeff Maffa, President and CEO at Auros Knowledge Systems. I think he's working on his audio too. Yeah, he's going, Well, anyway, he's going to tell us what's new with Auros IQ. So hopefully he's ready to tell us all about it now. Okay, he's just muted though for a second,
Okay,
so
thank
let's
you.
make sure.
I'm back.
Okay,
Thank
cool.
you, Amy. Appreciate it. All right. Hopefully everybody can see the presentation. Yes? Congratulations, everybody. You have made it to the end of the 2021 Knowledge Aware Conference, and this is the final presentation. So thank you very much for spending the time with me, and let's get going. So to talk about what's new in Auros, the first thing I want to talk about is what we introduced at the end of last year with the idea of what is Auros IQ. You know, Auros Knowledge Systems is the company, Auros IQ is the technology, Knowledge Aware is the concept that Auros IQ attempts to bring to life. And we feel that there's room for another term, and it's the idea of a knowledge operating system. And it's to fit more into the IT portfolio think, right? So where does Auros sit in the Auros IQ, sit in terms of the enterprise portfolio? So we're calling it a knowledge operating system. There's a lot of pros and cons to that. We've had discussions with many of you on this topic, and this idea will continue to evolve. So we introduced this idea that Auros as an IT footprint is a knowledge operating system. So what do we mean by that? Well, what we mean is at the center of Auros are three primary technologies that you've heard a lot about over the last couple of days. There's the knowledge packet, which is this way to encapsulate knowledge in a granular, modular, actionable unit. There's the assessment control, the tool that helps us to provision and activate knowledge within the flow of work. And then there's a knowledge processing engine that I'm going to talk a little bit about in just a bit, that is making this process far easier, more robust, more higher fidelity, and more valuable. And so that's essentially what Auros IQ is. And then on top of that, you know, we have the issues management system that we've heard a few people talking about, this idea of community that helps our system be bottom up. Team boards, you actually heard quite a bit about this year as opposed to other years, becoming a larger and larger part of the collaboration suite, putting it all together, so to speak. I describe team boards as the way a team has all their knowledge aware stuff in one spot, and reports and analytics play a part in this. And then in the last year and a half, really, we've really gone a long way to extending the feature set through AI enablement. And some of you know about the knowledge health stuff. We call it Vitality. Actually, Susan just mentioned it in the last presentation. Last year, we talked about these learning automation processes that are AI enabled. We call them learning cycles. I consider this still to be a beta type feature for Auros, but it is coming, and it will be an important part of the knowledge aware process. The document ingester was talked about quite a bit at this conference, and the proximity search is a technology that's been around a little while for now, but is getting more and more usage. And so why a knowledge operating system? Well, you have this core set of features that are presented here, and they're presented to the enterprise in the enterprise's digital thread through the web, through connectors, through API REST services. Darwin talked about that a little bit. And someone asked about mobile. You know, the mobile's here, it's coming, and we're building out that capability as we speak. And this interfaces with an enterprise in such a broad way. You have to start to conceive of it as a knowledge operating system, because it's not a solution for quality. It's not a solution for CAD. It's not a solution for manufacturing. It's not a solution for PD. It's not a solution for, you know, whatever specific thing. So, you know, it interfaces not only with product development, not only with manufacturing, not only with quality, but within all kinds of different processes that you heard about during the last couple of days. And so what is a system that does that, right? And so kind of, again, knowledge operating system. But it's more than that, right? Now we started to introduce in the last year, you know, what happens when we want to exchange knowledge services to partners, both on the customer side, the supply side, and even parallel partners. You know, Dan Cronin talked about American Bureau of Shipping. earlier today, and that's kind of a lateral way of sharing knowledge. Okay, so this is what was new in Auros, and this is I kind of present this so you can kind of see where we are today with the Auros IQ platform, and I'm starting to explain why we want to call it a knowledge operating system. I'm welcoming your feedback on the term. I've had both positive and negative feedback alike. I welcome you to help us to decide how to make dispensation of that concept. Okay, so now we'll get into specifically what are we doing with Auros. So most of you know we went in the last 5 years from a 14-month development cycle to a 3-month development cycle. So we're producing 4 primary releases each year. So I'm going back just 3 releases, 6, 7, and 8, and we have these things called themes as standard in Agile. And really the 2 themes I really want to talk about are artificial intelligence and user experience. So within Auros IQ 6, 7, and 8, we really have a number of specific features I can point to that talk to how we're doing and what we're doing in these 3 things. So they're labeled here. So if you can kind of scan through this, I'm just going to talk about 3 of them real brief before we get into featuring, which I think is what most people want to talk about. The first one is learning cycles. So I mentioned that previously. We introduced it last year, and we are continuing to try to move what we believe will be an essential, important, and even groundbreaking feature of Knowledge Aware as we go forward. So, it's an AI enablement. We can detect that a learning has happened through a variety of different AI techniques, and then we can curate the process of what we think happened through AI detection through a people curated process to learning something new, creating new knowledge packets, modifying knowledge packets. And that can be a process that truly creates closed loop learning. And again, I chose to talk about it here because I believe it is something in the future of Knowledge Aware that will be as essential as assessments, as essential as knowledge packets. From a user experience side, Auros IQ, I'm going to just say it, has taken some lumps for maybe not presenting the best user experience. Now, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword for us because at one point, common users of the system say it's quite intuitive and easy to use, but we have an issue with onboarding new users, right? So we've taken that very seriously, and we have a personnel development process in place. We have 2 employees that are working very hard in developing their skills here, Jimmy and Bridget. I'm sure you guys will talk to them at some point. They're bringing out their own skill set here and have completely changed the way we think about user experience. And on top of that, we've brought in an external expert he's a game-changing kind of guy, and we meet with him on a regular basis, and he's helping to educate us on a process. So we've fundamentally started to rethink user experience and what we need to do, and you're going to start to see the differences. The first difference I'll say that you'll see, and it hit in the user experience for the Gantt chart on Teamboards. So I have not had a single person say, oh, I didn't like that change, right? There's always somebody who doesn't like it, but not with the Gantt chart. Everybody who's seen it appreciates the user experience's difference. And it is. It's just a different level of polish and thought about how the user interacts with the tool. And even though the change wasn't functionally that different from a user experience, it just seems to be much more appreciated. Talk about one more tool before we get into featuring, and that is this idea of the document ingester. So you've heard Steve talk about it. You heard it's talking about all the different places that it can be being used, and we recently added this idea of the element predictor, the element selector AI tool. I just wanted to bring this one up because eventually that same AI element will be used to predict extended elements inside of Auros without the document ingester. So imagine if you were to write a knowledge packet and it's suggesting the tags, the extended element values, and maybe even getting good enough to actually place and ensure and just being a double check that the knowledge packets that are getting authored are getting the right metadata for proper provisioning. And as you know, with Knowledge Aware, provisioning is rather important. Okay, so I know what most of you like to come to this particular presentation about is really not what is out there, because most of you are current now, because in the world of cloud, everybody stays fairly current with the software. Most of you really are interested in, hey, I got it, what happened? What do you got for me in the future that's going to be fun? So in Auros IQ 9 and 10, 9 obviously is a fairly mature product already. It's due to be released in November. Josh, if I've got that wrong, please let me know. But really the themes for IQ 9 and 10, I don't want to go too far out. We do think way further than that, but I just want to talk about 9 and 10, are really artificial intelligence user experience. So the same two that we just talked to, there's going to be a lot of content on these two things in the next two releases. But we're adding to that this idea of a significant upgrade to the knowledge processing engine. So to be clear, the knowledge processing engine is the tool set that sits within Auros that most of you don't touch directly, but are seeing the results all the time. So when you go to an assessment and it asks you for a couple parameters and it automatically says you're yellow, you're red, you're green, okay, the knowledge processing engine is at work. If you're looking at a method and you complete a question and it's branching you to a certain set of activities and asking you to create an assessment, that's the knowledge processing engine at work. So we haven't talked, I want to give my colleague Josh Cullis some props here. He's kind of been spearheading the process of rethinking some of the fundamentals of the way our knowledge processing engine didn't work, and given how it's being used today and how we want it to be used in the future, providing a very good course of action to basically create the knowledge processing engine 2.0, 3.0, however you want to measure it. And that will be implemented during the course of IQ 9 and IQ 10. And that should make a number of good outcomes. One is easier to use, a little more intuitive to use, a little more robust in processing, and more breadth of how to be able to use it. It can cover more conditions. So the knowledge processing engine, you'll see some differences in IQ 9 and IQ 10, and it is taking quite a bit of our bandwidth to get it right. Okay, so let's talk. I'm going to talk about three things that we're doing for the future in IQ 9 and 10. So I'm really just giving, the next 6 months kind of runway for what we're talking about. And my friends at General Motors, I know changes to the user interface are somewhat problematic. But the first one I want to show you is kind of the next generation of assessment control. So why are we doing it? Okay, most people that use assessments on a regular basis, they like it. We don't get too many complaints. We get complaints about people who have to use it once and maybe not again for 6 months. So that's one of the driving changes. What can we do to make it more intuitive, cleaner, more modern? But another thing that's happening that's super important, and I mentioned it yesterday, is that the knowledge processing activity is becoming more integral to the assessment process, where previous generations of assessment emphasized attestation. Manually, I'm passing, I'm failing, I'm yellow, I'm red and green, and I'm clicking a button for this. Where we all think we're going and where value gets unlocked is to not do that and rely on the knowledge processing, right? To interact with the knowledge directly and not passively. And that requires the knowledge processing. Given that the knowledge processing engine is going to play a more integrated role in more and more use cases, it became necessary to think about how the user will interact with an assessment when the knowledge processing part of this is a much bigger and more important part of the assessment. So here's a screenshot. It's not official. We're still working on it, but this is something that you're likely to see something very similar to this in the future, and it does give a nod more to knowledge processing. It simplifies, it makes things more consistent. The biggest thing that you probably see is that the menuing system on the left is no longer there, and it's replaced by a much simpler kind of setup. Okay, and certainly I think I would be more than happy to entertain complaints or criticisms or attaboys, based on these screens. But we do need to fundamentally move forward the user experience in assessments given the onset or the greater prevalence of knowledge processing. And this helps us get there. Okay, the next thing is, again, we're changing the knowledge processing engine, and the way it interacts, the knowledge processing engine is going to interact with method KPACs that you heard a lot about during the course of the last 2 days. We're starting to rethink that, and again, it's a fresher look, a more modern look, and will most certainly be more intuitive to use. I don't think that the last version was not, was hard to use by any means, but it's very clear that we can make and simplify how we interact with methods. And again, it has to do with the fact that originally methods were more about documenting process, and now methods clearly are all in on the enactment of methods, right? And the enactment of process, the tracking, the gathering of the data. And during the shift, we need to take advantage of that and adjust the user experience accordingly. And I think everybody who looks at this kind of mock-up of method would say that looks cleaner, that looks simpler, right? More simple, I should say. So this is a mock-up. This is more IQ 10-ish. And the third one I will show you is a mock-up of the offline assessment. So John mentioned about the need for offline assessments. I believe there's a footprint in Stellantis for offline assessments, and I believe, I'll talk about that in a little bit, that offline assessments is actually going to be a very big deal for many field service kind of organizations. So this offline assessment actually is just a mock-up. It's going to be decontented a little bit. The functionality we're going to have in the first version is going to be limited for offline assessments, and we will build more and more functionality into the offline assessments over time. Okay. I'm going to be very brief here, so I'm ready. Are there any questions that I can answer at this time?
Carlo has a comment that the AC looks great. Good job.
Thank you, Carlo. Appreciate it. We hope everybody likes it. Those of you that have to do end user documentation hate any change to the user interface, but it's a necessary and important stage or process of evolution towards a more automated knowledge process.
Yeah, and he just added that he likes the new method colors around the box. It's easier to see than the halo.
My friend Jimmy Roboleski will be very happy that you said that.
I remember Jimmy from last year. Anyway, I have a question for you.
Shoot, Amy.
Do you have a process to take in customer suggestions?
And how? And how? So I think every software company that has a profile similar to us, meaning B2B, in an emerging technology, it is essential to listen to your customers. And I hope that, my friends at Navistar, my friends at General Motors, my friends at Ford, and several others would agree that if we've done if Auros Knowledge System's done anything good, it's that we've been listening, and we routinely take requests in a very formalized way from customers and convert them into value-added features that meet the specific needs of specific workflows. Now, there's a tension there between that and a strategic vision and making a commercial product, but I think we've done a good job of negotiating it. It's changed over the last few years, but we continue to have a process by which the application engineers that work for Josh collect enhancement requests from every customer, and they're considered in a content planning process, which, by the way, is all done through Auros. And we prioritize and bin and plan based on those, partially based on those inputs, and several other factors: strategic vision, technology opportunity, market changes, things like that.
Excellent. Now, Morrow says about the new method KPAC, is the change to the looks only or to the functionality as well?
Marl, it's a great question. We are We will do everything possible to guarantee backward compatibility. So I think your question is, well, will my knowledge packets still work? And the answer is by and large, yes, they should still work. It is more than a skin, though. It's definitely more than a skin. So basically, Josh and his team working on the update to the knowledge processing engine, how it works, and how much more complete it's going to be by the time we get to February, necessitated some changes to the visualization of the method so that they're in sync, right? So when the knowledge processing engine of the method determines a certain state or a certain output or a certain condition, it needs to be visualized consistently within that method view. And so these changes are kind of hand in hand with each other. And they are absolutely, not kind of, they are absolutely hand in hand with each other. So yes, there's a reskinning that looks cleaner. I'm glad so far I think the comments have said that's the case. But it's not just that. It is absolutely an indication of the fundamentals at play as the method gets processed by the knowledge processing engine and those changes.
Okay. And Nicole wonders, what kind of AI features are you thinking of adding? And do you have any details around anything?
You know, we are consumed with bringing, at least me personally, my thing is all about learning cycles. So in my AI background, which I do have an AI background, is how do we keep moving our ability to create learning automatically moving forward, right? And as most of you know, AI is based on the quality of the data that you can put into the process, right? All AI is based on the data. And so one thing that's cool about knowledge aware is when you activate knowledge in the flow of work, there's a new set of data to be harvested to use by AI that if you're using a document, you don't have. If you're using an Excel checklist, you don't have. So the things that we're working on are very much in that vein, as well as we have another project now that we're working on to move the document ingester to be more intelligent and not just use the formatting cues, but actually work on documents that require OCR and things like this. So, fundamentally, we're working on the learning side of the system and on the document ingester. There's some other prototypes we're thinking about, with project risk and predicting timing delays and things like that in the project, but I think those are a little further out.
Okay. Now let us know if you have any other questions here. I don't see any at the moment. I have gone ahead and pasted the survey link into the chat, so please take just a few seconds to do that. And I think if there aren't any more questions, Jeff and I were talking earlier, it sounds like we're just going to kind of roll into the closing comments directly from here, right here, while we're all gathered instead of, clicking on another session. So Jeff, did you want to go ahead and transition over to that now?
I would.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is if you don't mind, I'm going to try to get out of presenting mode.
Sure. And I'll turn off my camera and come back later with some announcements, including next year's conference and a survey for the whole thing. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. All right, so I do have some closing comments. I appreciate you guys bearing witness to my closing comments here. I just kind of try to do as much of a recap as I can and trying to tie it all together, because this conference, more than any conference in the past, clearly had a very well orchestrated set of themes that emerged without actual orchestration, which I think is a tremendously satisfying feeling to me. So in the knowledge aware expanding picture start off, I mentioned that there were two themes, and the two themes were, the idea that knowledge models were playing a more important role in processes. We were less text-based knowledge packets, more model-based knowledge packets, and the idea of extended enterprise. And lo and behold, we had many presentations about knowledge modeling, but Darwin, Peterson, where it was all about very complicated knowledge modeling. And of course, the extended enterprise was touched on by ABS, Stellantis, and GM alike. And again, I'll say this, some of you probably heard me say it before, is that when it comes to extended enterprise and knowledge management or knowledge aware, the genie's out of the bottle. It's happening. your supply chain will be a part of your knowledge processes in the future. You may not be thinking about it yet, but I'm absolutely certain, a lot of the OEMs that may be on the, at the conference this year probably didn't even know that they probably have one or several engineers working with Stellantis or working with General Motors that are already doing assessments, right? Then Josh came on and, from Auros Knowledge System, talked about our Auros IQ, Auros Knowledge Systems footprint with KnowledgeWare, and I can't understate it. I can't overstate it, excuse me. The extent with which we attempt to be knowledge-aware in everything we do, from hiring to product development. We now basically do everything that way, and it isn't because we want it to be a marketing tool, it's because it's just a better way for us to do business. It's really become that clear for us. We then went into a panel discussion where Wendy Lang, Jeff Mayhew, and Gene Kaufman gave us a good idea about how broadly knowledge-aware can be applied. I mean, the footprints in these three organizations is large. I mean, it's a testimony to the value and the underlying power and staying power of knowledge-aware. I think if I had to sum up, there's more than 50,000 users easily across these three companies. That's a lot of people and a lot of different use cases, doing lots of different kinds of assessments and lots of different kinds of knowledge packets and lots of value being generated, a lot of systems decommissioned. It's standing the test of time, and it's still growing. So if you get anything out of the panel discussion, it should be it's here and it's coming. The knowledge-aware thing. It may not be Auros IQ, but the knowledge-aware thing, it's happening. Then that was followed by Tim Glau and Marcus Fisher, who talked about the certification process. I mean, they did a great job of laying out, the future of the certification process. I think it'll be an extremely valuable kind of thing for people to come and get certified. As they said, we intend to have the awareness certification available by the end of this year. Stake is in the ground. So yeah, I look forward to having that out there, and I thank Tim and Marcus for coming up and letting everybody know. Now today, I just say one thing about today's presentations in general. There's three traditional North American OEMs, right? And we've had them all at conferences in the past. However, this is the first year that all three presented at the same conference. So we had all three presenting. That is a great thing, and I thank them all for participating. But let's start with Mike and Yvette from ZF. That was a great presentation about how to do Auros, their whole process of success. I appreciated the way Yvette talked about, the Excel process being copies. And we find that a lot of people say that, and Auros, getting people out of Excel engineering is a big deal. I think it was Mike that talked about possibly, knowledge-aware being an effective counterpoint to working from home, where people aren't interacting directly as much. And we hope to bring that message out to more companies, because we actually believe that very much. Then we got to Darwin from Spirit, and Darwin's vision for what's happening here is an ambitious one, to say the very least. I think he kind of highlighted that he's pushing the limits of what the knowledge processing engine for Auros will do to get the right processing. But if there's ever, the idea of knowledge modeling being important, I mean, this is his whole use case there is fundamentally dependent on the knowledge processing to get the process plans to be correct. And his statement that the value of explicit knowledge is hard to overstate is a extremely good one. It really is. Then Dan Cronin talked about ABS digital rules. And as a third-party supplier of knowledge, I believe this is also a trend you're going to see, that people with knowledge, maybe it's a casting supplier or a machine tool supplier, will be able to provide knowledge to companies so that they can design parts for better machining, design parts for better casting, design parts for better whatever, right? Maybe SAE would be involved, maybe, who knows? But this idea that a third party can be a knowledge source, I think, is highlighted by what Dan and ABS is doing with the digital rule sets for commercial ship classing. And I thank Dan for his presentation. Then Jennifer Joseph came on from Stellantis and talked about the advantages of putting it into the supply chain, this knowledge-aware process, and consolidating tool sets and quality, making it easier for the supplier. And again, she also mentioned the process having been in Excel, and getting it out of Excel really helps make the process work better, and is yet another example of the genie being out of the bottle with extended enterprise, exchanging knowledge through a formal knowledge process with a knowledge aware type kind of idea. John Yanconi from FMSNA, he talked about using Auros in the field. I call that kind of the mechanics doing mechanical and mechanic work in the hull of a ship or in a breakdown room, a field work, right? Requiring the offline, requiring less white collar type people doing knowledge work, and I think that is also a trend that we'll see more of in the future. I really do. Field work and knowledge aware will be a thing. Lastly, Susan came on and talked about the different ways that you can share knowledge through the partner portal and the partner sharing. And the way she did a very detailed and lucid explanation of how these tools can be deployed and how GM is extracting value by integrating partners. I really liked how Susan used the navigation metaphor to say, hey, we're using it, we're getting navigation, but we can't just give the supplier the old paper map. We have to include them in navigation. Why would we not do that, right? And this is really what that's about. So, yeah, a lot of good value. I sum up by saying I want to thank our sponsor, IKAA, for sponsoring the conference. Please go and talk to them if you can. I want to thank my fellow IKAA board members, Wendy Lang, Marcus Fisher, and Tim Glau, for all year round working on this process and promoting the idea of knowledge aware. I'd like to thank Amy. Her high energy is hard to follow, so it's tough, but thank you, Amy. And thank all of you for donating your time and being interested in the idea of knowledge aware. And I hope that we can continue our conversation and continue evolving knowledge aware towards I think the inevitable future that it has, which is being the way that engineering knowledge is managed in the future. Thank you.
Excellent. And you covered a few of the points that I had, so that makes it a little easier for me. If you want to go ahead and just mute your thing, I think we have some sort of little feedback thing. But I just wanted to invite you to please fill out that post-conference survey. I've put the link in the chat, but also there is a barcode if you want to go that route on your screen right now. And well, now my screen is going crazy over here in the meantime, but okay, there we go. We're back on track. So I've got a couple other things to tell you. I know Jeff already did his thanks. I'll give you a moment if you want to click that barcode. Go ahead and slide through. Otherwise, check that link in the side. IKAA, he already thanked. So now, yes, next year's conference, I saw comments about the excellent food that you can look forward to. The 2022 Knowledge Aware Conference will be held September 28th through the 29th at the Inn at St. John's in Plymouth, Michigan. So thank you for your comments right now that you're putting in the chat. It was a real pleasure being with all of you. The speakers were excellent, and you all participated once again with your comments and questions. And I hope to meet you in person. So be on the lookout for some emails coming in the next few weeks with recordings of the conference. Hope you find value in that. I know some of the presentation decks will also be available. We had a few inquiries about those, and hoping you'll also stay connected with others from the conference. And you can visit sponsors in their virtual booths. We're ending a little bit early, so there's certainly time for you to explore around in the platform, chat with each other, and see the sponsors. Once again, a little plug for the survey, and we'll see you next year.